I'm delighted to welcome you, parents, family, faculty, staff, and most of all, graduates of the Icahn School of Medicine, and to our 47th commencement ceremony. Today's a day when you begin to look at the future, to think of yourselves not as medical students any longer, but as doctors. You're entering the medical profession during a time of revolution in biology. Not unlike the revolution of physics we experienced some 100 years ago. As a result of that revolution in physics, our understanding of the world dramatically changed. At that time, 100 years ago, no one would have guessed that what those physicists were learning would fundamentally change the way we would communicate with one another and lead to the development of mobile devices with such amazing computing power that we could transmit messages all over the globe virtually instantaneously and with a few taps of a touchscreen. Similarly, the revolution in biology is giving us unprecedented insight into many diseases. This insight will transform the world we live in ways none of us can yet imagine. We see the evidence, though, today. For example, through new breakthroughs in our understanding of genomics and immunology, some of the most terrible diseases affecting our health, particularly cancer, are having far better outcomes than they did just a few short years ago. And I have no doubt that our ability to treat and cure diseases will continue to grow exponentially as a result of the discoveries that we'll be making in the next decades. As a profession and as a society, we're going to have to confront the ethical challenges that come hand in hand with discovery. The most pressing question we now face is, how much should society pay for life-changing, life-saving therapeutics that are emerging from the revolution in biology? Indeed, how much can our society even afford to pay? As we've seen in the headlines over the last year, some pharmaceutical companies are already pricing their drugs so exorbitantly that they end up being far beyond the financial reach of the average American. People are enduring unnecessary suffering or even dying because they can't afford the treatment that would change their lives. Some pharma companies argue that their pricing model is justified because of how much they're saving the healthcare system over the long term. For example, by their logic, they can price a drug for liver failure at perhaps $90,000 per treatment because downstream the consequences of liver failure are significantly more expensive than $90,000. And that's true. Imagine, though, if that had been the prevailing rationale when we discovered the polio vaccine. Think about that for a minute. The polio vaccine alone saved enormous downstream costs. People who contracted polio suffered varying degrees of disability, and some spent their lives in iron lungs, unable even to breathe without assistance. And yet, I remember lining up in my elementary school in second grade and getting the vaccine for free, and having my mother rejoice when I came home that I wouldn't get polio, and there wouldn't be a polio epidemic. If instead we had been told, well, we can save you from polio, but it'll cost you about $100,000. Would our country have eradicated that terrible epidemic? I know my parents couldn't have afforded the treatment. They wouldn't have known what to do. But historically, we haven't priced drugs that way because there was an unspoken social contract in place. When discoveries were made and new treatments developed, pharmaceutical companies priced them to receive a fair return on their investment while ensuring that all people would be able to share in the benefits of that discovery. In some few cases today, that implicit social contract has been broken, and the pricing models that are emerging now risk entrenching a tiered system in which only some, not all, will benefit from great therapeutic advances. What makes this all the more distressing, in my view, is that the debate over what is a fair price seems to have forgotten that the vast majority of biological research has been paid for by American taxpayers. Generations of taxpayers have given their money to the NIH, which in turn distributes that money through grants that supported research and built a foundation of scientific knowledge. a foundation upon which so many drug discoveries rests, and a foundation that by its very nature was far too basic to be a part of Big Pharma's research portfolio. Scientists today have proven successful in discovering and developing breakthrough drugs because they were able to stand on the shoulders of this taxpayer-funded research. And even though much of that research may never have been explicitly listed on a patent application, nor need it be, without that science, these advances, these breakthrough products would not have been possible. Graduates, this is both an exciting and a complicated time to enter into the practice of medicine. You will be part of a golden era of biological science that's going to have enormous benefits that we cannot even imagine yet. Perhaps even a pill that will slow aging. Just as my great parents could never have imagined how the revolution in physics would lead to the kind of abilities to communicate and process information that we now have. In your lifetime, our ability to treat the most devastating diseases will be utterly transformed. That's great and something to look forward to. But you'll also play a critical and perhaps difficult role in determining who will be able to share the benefits of that science. It's part of the responsibility they take on today as you make the transition from student to doctor, that you will have to wade into this conversation to be a voice of reason on what is certainly going to be one of the most fundamental moral and ethical questions of the 21st century. The health of future generations of Americans, indeed the health of people all over the world, depends on the outcome of this monumental debate. It is both your privilege and your obligation to join that debate. Congratulations to you all, and best wishes for a long and productive career.